umbilical cord blood NK cells. Authors Kapitalina Milkova, Professor Milkova, she is here, and the report will be presented by Zhanna Sharoyan. Please, Zhanna, come. And don't be afraid.
Я все слышу. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Today, on behalf of all authors of the report, I will speak about umbilical cord blood and bone marrow as a source of natural killers for cure alloreactive adaptive immunotherapy. Adaptive immunotherapy is a type of treatment that uses the immune cells to modulate and improve the immune response. Today, we distinguish two fundamentally different types of adaptive immunotherapy with manipulated or unmanipulated cells. In case of autologous adaptive immunotherapy, only manipulated cells could be used. The most famous example of adaptive immunotherapy is allogenic bone marrow transplantation. Here you can see similarities between them, the same steps of the treatment, the same key role of donor selection and its alloreactivity, the same sources of cells, and the only difference is cells engraftment in case of bone marrow transplantation. Only bone marrow and umbilical cord blood could be used as unmanipulated native cells. During adaptive immunotherapy, immune cells are looking for tumor cells like a policeman looking for a criminal. In case of adaptive therapy with unmanipulated cells, the situation is similar to body control. All cells are checked and only cells with dangerous signals are being destroyed. In case of therapy with manipulated cells, the immune cells could recognize the tumor cells only by specific signals, specific markers. But regular transformation of tumor cells leads to markers changing and future relapse. For example, we're looking for a beautiful brown-haired girl. After transformation, she looks like a completely different person. So can you say anything in common? No. So just trust me, it is the same actress. Exactly that ability to recognize and interact with dangerous cells is called alloreactivity. And alloreactivity plays a leading role in outcome of adaptive therapy in general and bone marrow transplantation in particular. Indication for adaptive immunotherapy is quite diverse than oncology and hematology. The effectiveness of adaptive cells is described in autoimmune and neurodegenerative diseases, but today we are focusing on cancer. Here, alloreactive adaptive immunotherapy is based on several basic principles. Let's look at them in more details. The first principle was demonstrated by William Coley in the late of 1800s. He showed absolute, unquestionable evidence that the immune system is an essential part of cancer treatment. He used toxins for treatment of sarcoma in inoperable cases and for prevention of progression after surgical removal. And by enhancing the immune response, he significantly improved the results of the treatment, which are comparable with modern results of treatment. In 70 years, in Blakhin centers in Moscow, Deichmann and Trapeznikov also started to use cellular therapy. On the results of different experiments, bone marrow was selected as a source of cells. They demonstrated that the immediate effect of cellular therapy depends on cells amount. Unfortunately, immediate or the first effect was short-term. Most likely that improvements were related to the first effect of allogenic cells. To obtain long-term results, it's essential to develop the second effect of superposition of two curves. And for longer function of transfused cells, lymphodepletion is necessary. Important to note that the second effect is stochastic. Another basis for immunotherapy is selection of donor. As I mentioned above, all reactivity or cellular vision plays a key role in outcome of cellular therapy. But it is enough to recognize. It's not enough to recognize, just recognize the criminal. It's important to have enough force to control him. To describe the power of the immune cells, a mathematical model was developed. The index of cytotoxic activity reflects the balance of activating and inhibitory receptor of mature NK cells. Successful treatment requires both all reactivity and high index of cytotoxic activity. Selection of donor is important part of adaptive immunotherapy. The donor cells are the main component of the treatment. For adaptive therapy, selection of donor even more important than for bone marrow transplantation. For many years, we used bone marrow as a source of unmanipulated cells, but there are a number of difficulties associated with selection of donor, with age limit, bone marrow harvesting, especially during pandemic. We still have too little information about mechanism of immune regulation. That's why we use only unmanipulated cells. And the only alternative source of unmanipulated naive cells is umbilical cord blood. We used umbilical cord blood as salvage therapy to refractory patients who are not eligible for any treatment with life expectancy less than 3 months. As a historical control, we use data from patients who undergo to adoptive salvage therapy with bone marrow. The groups were similar with respect to age, gender, ECOG, pretreatment. There was a statistical difference in history of radiotherapy and follow-up, high in control bone marrow group. Patients who didn't achieve complete remission in 3 months after adoptive therapy were potential candidates for repeat transfusions. Due to comorbidity, not all patients underwent lymphodepletion. Regardless of lymphodepletion, all patients had clinical improvement during the first 2 weeks after adoptive therapy. Most patients finally became eligible for any treatment, but they didn't want to treat at all because they finally feel good. Overall survival better in the bone marrow group due to lymphodepletion. Only donors with high level of cytotoxic activity were selected as bone marrow donors. The index of cytotoxic activity of umbilical cord blood wasn't decisive. We can confirm good tolerability and good feasibility of treatment for patients with comorbidities. Given comparable treatment results, we could recommend wider use of umbilical cord blood as a source of cells, not just for salvage therapy, but also for MRD eradication. In some cases, they can be considered as a faster, safer replacement of CAR T cells. At the end of speech, we want to express our gratitude to our teachers and partners. Thank you for attention. No question from...
I have a question. It's very simple. You don't have to sit down.
No.
How many cord blood samples you need, and how do you separate the cells? Because it's always a problem.
You mean how many cells we need to choose to select a donor? We use 3 different sources of cord blood to choose a donor for transfusion. For transfusion, we use just 1 sample. For 1 time, 1 sample.
Okay.
When you do your ICA index,
Index of cytotoxic activity. Yeah.
Are you planning to use also monoclonal antibodies to see if, because you can couple your natural killer cells with...
If we switch on the presentation, I can show antibodies which we used. We analyzed mature NK cells And after that, mathematical model is making a curve for us.
Okay.
Okay.
And then you introduce with the monoclonal antibody, probably you have a different ICA with different donors because you have
yes,
the
it
VF.
was different donors. At the right side of the slide, I showed bone marrow donor because we use just bone marrow donors with high level of cytotoxic activity, index of cytotoxic activity. And when we use umbilical cord blood, we didn't analyze index of cytotoxic activity for selection of donor because all donors of umbilical cord blood had high level, good level of index of cytotoxic activity.
Okay, thank you.
A quick question. After transplant, usually the CD4 cells are regenerated slowly. With the cord blood, do you get a very fast regeneration of the normal CD4s instead of the CD8s?
Honestly, we didn't analyze CD4 and CD8 levels, but we analyzed NK levels. Of NK levels is became the index of cytotoxic activity became higher, significantly higher in 1 week after transfusion.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, we have, yeah.